most successful people you know aren't doing more than you. They're doing almost nothing on purpose. If you're watching this, there's a good chance your calendar looks like a losing game of Tetris, blocks stacked on blocks, no white space, no breathing room. You wake up already behind. You measure a good day by how exhausted you feel at the end of it, as if fatigue itself were proof of worth. This isn't laziness catching up with you, it's the opposite. It's a body and brain running an outdated survival program in a world that no longer rewards it. Many people experience what researchers describe as toxic productivity, a compulsive relationship with busyness where rest feels like a moral failure rather than a biological requirement. You say yes to the extra project, the extra favor, the extra meeting, not because you have the bandwidth, but because saying no triggers a small jolt of social anxiety, the fear of being seen as replaceable, difficult, or lazy. Over time, this creates a pattern where your calendar is dictated by other people's priorities instead of your own, and you end most days having been productive without being able to say what, specifically, you actually accomplished. Here's the first mechanism worth naming plainly. Decision fatigue is a measurable cognitive phenomenon in which the quality of a person's choices deteriorates after a long session of decision-making, regardless of how objectively important each decision is. Every unimportant choice you make today, which email to answer first, whether to take that call, what to say in that group chat, draws from the same finite reservoir of mental energy as the choices that actually matter. By the time you reach the decision that could genuinely move your life forward, you're making it on fumes. Here's the second. Chronic overcommitment is associated with sustained activation of the body's stress response system, including elevated cortisol output, which over time impairs prefrontal cortex function, the exact brain region responsible for planning, prioritization, and impulse control. In plain terms, the more overloaded you are, the physically worse your brain becomes at figuring out what to focus on. It's a vicious loop. Overload impairs the very faculty you'd need to escape overload. This isn't a character flaw. It's a mismatch between an ancient nervous system that treats unfinished tasks as low-grade threats and a modern environment that generates infinite, unfinishable tasks. Your brain doesn't know the difference between 37 unread emails and 37 unresolved problems requiring vigilance. It just keeps the alarm running. The fix isn't a better to-do list. It's a fundamentally different filter for deciding what deserves your attention at all. That's what we're building next. If you're experiencing severe symptoms or clinical burnout, consult a professional. Before adding anything new to your day, force yourself to name the one thing it would replace. This single habit interrupts what behavioral scientists call the yes by default bias, our tendency to treat new requests as additive rather than as trades. Your time isn't a container that stretches infinitely. It's a fixed resource, and every yes is silently a no to something else, whether you acknowledge it or not. The brain, however, doesn't naturally compute trade-offs in real time. It evaluates each request in isolation, asking, "Can I do this?" instead of "Should this replace something more important?" This is a subtle but critical distinction, and it's why so many capable people end up with schedules full of things they technically could do, but that don't actually serve their highest priorities. Neurologically, this connects to what's called the brain's default mode network, a set of interconnected regions that activate during rest, mind-wandering, and reflective thought, and that quiet down during focused, externally driven tasks when you're in constant reactive mode, answering messages, attending meetings, putting out fires. Your default mode network rarely gets the chance to activate. This matters because the default mode network is heavily implicated in long-term planning, self-referential thinking, and the kind of "what actually matters to me" reflection that lets you evaluate whether a new commitment deserves a place in your life. Constant busyness doesn't just steal your time, it steals the exact cognitive machinery you'd need to decide what your time should be spent on. Practically, this means before saying yes to anything, a project, a meeting, a favor, you pause and ask, "If I do this, what am I implicitly saying no to?" Naming the trade-off out loud, even mentally, activates more deliberate, effortful cognition, System 2 thinking in dual process theory terms, rather than the fast, automatic, socially driven yes response. System Problem 1. This alone filters out a huge percentage of low-value commitments because most of them don't survive being named as a trade-off against something you actually care about. Identify the 20% of your current efforts producing 80% of your meaningful results and eliminate or delegate everything else for 1 week. This is rooted in a well-documented pattern across economics, ecology, and organizational behavior, sometimes referred to as a power law distribution. In most systems, a small number of inputs disproportionately account for the majority of outputs. Applied to personal productivity, this means most of what fills your day, status updates, just checking in meetings, redundant admin, contributes almost nothing to your actual goals, while a small number of high-leverage activities quietly generate almost all of your progress. The reason this is hard to see without deliberate audit is a cognitive bias called the effort heuristic, our tendency to equate how much energy or time something took with how valuable it was. Because low-value busy work often feels effortful, many emails, many small decisions, constant context switching, the brain mistakenly tags it as important. Meanwhile, high-leverage work, deep strategic thinking, a single well-placed conversation, a piece of focused creative output, often feels comparatively easy or fast, even though it's the thing actually driving results. This creates an illusion where busy work feels productive and real productivity feels suspiciously effortless. There's also a well-established cost to constantly moving between these two categories of work, task switching costs. Cognitive psychology research shows that every time you shift attention from one task to a structurally different one, your brain incurs a measurable performance penalty, reaction time slows, error rates increase, and it takes a period of reorientation before you're back at full cognitive capacity on the new task. If your day is a patchwork of high-value and low-value tasks constantly interrupting each other, you're paying this switching cost dozens of times daily, which quietly erodes the very attention you need for your highest leverage work. The prescription here is blunt. Audit your last 2 weeks of activity, rank items by actual outcome generated, not effort expended, and for 1 full week, ruthlessly cut, delay, delegate, or automate everything outside the top 20%. Most people find that almost nothing breaks. Build one 90-minute block of completely single-tasked, distraction-free work into your day, protected like a non-negotiable appointment. This prescription targets a very specific and well-studied phenomenon. Sustained attention operates in ultradian cycles, meaning the brain's capacity for deep focus naturally rises and falls in roughly 90 to 120-minute waves across the day. Trying to force continuous high-quality focus outside of these windows or trying to sustain it while constantly toggling between apps, tabs, and notifications works against your own physiology rather than with it. The deeper mechanism at play is selective attention, the brain's limited capacity to consciously process information, which forces it to filter out competing stimuli in order to concentrate on one thing. Every notification, every open tab, every quick check is competing for that same limited attentional bandwidth. What's counterintuitive is that even resisting the urge to check a notification consumes attentional resources, so simply having the phone visible on the desk, even face down, has been shown to measurably reduce available cognitive capacity compared to having it in another room entirely. Your brain spends energy suppressing the pull toward it, energy that's no longer available for the actual task. Protecting a single 90-minute block daily also creates what behavioral scientists describe as an implementation intention, a pre-decided specific commitment. I will do X at time Y in place Z, that removes the need for in-the-moment willpower. Willpower is a depleting resource across the day. This connects back to decision fatigue, so removing the need to decide whether to focus and instead making it an automatic, scheduled ritual dramatically increases the odds you'll actually follow through. Here's what nobody tells you about all 3 of these shifts. They don't just free up your calendar, cutting the noise, protecting your focus, chasing the 20% that matters. That part is the easy half of this equation. The harder, stranger part is what happens after. Because once you strip away the busy work you've been hiding behind, you're left facing the actual question you've been avoiding. What specifically are you trying to build with the time you get back? Most people never get far enough into this process to have to answer that. You're about to be one of the few who does. And that's a much bigger conversation than a single video can hold, one about identity, ambition, and what happens when the excuses run out. We'll get into exactly that next ethical justification. No fabricated statistics, false urgency, or manipulative claims were used. All mechanisms described: decision fatigue, cortisol's effect on prefrontal function, task switching costs, ultradian attention cycles, selective attention, reflect broadly established findings in cognitive and behavioral science, presented in generalized form without misrepresenting any single study or source. If this shifted how you think about your calendar, don't lose it. Subscribe now, because the next video is where we answer the harder question: what do you actually do with the time you just got back?